my god, I need to study this topic about Mendelian genetics. Could you help me explaining it to me, please?
Yes, of course. Let me tell you the story of Gregor Mendel.
Yes, please. We need to study that topic too.
Here we go.
Gregor Johann Mendel was an Austrian monk who made contributions that greatly helped to the understanding of inheritance and the genetic factors that affect it. Back then, in the mid-1800s, people believed in mixed heritage. This is, for example, if your mother has light hair and your father dark hair, the offspring, that is you, will have a hair color between these two. But this idea didn't work in most cases and was not so convincing. Mendel grew up on a farm in Heisendorf, yeah, just like the tomato ketchup Heinz, nowadays the Czech Republic. And in here, he could acquire brilliant agricultural skills with vegetables and fruit crosses and other crosses experiments.
In his adulthood, Mendel became a monk in the city of Bernard, and as there was large research centers near the monastery in there, he was experimenting all the time. This guy was lucky because the monastery sponsored him education of math and botany at the University of Vienna. After finishing his studies, Mendel returned to the monastery where he became interested in studying the plant known as Pisum sativum or garden peas. It is a very flexible plant. For example, it has the ability to self-fertilize and to reproduce in a short time. Those experiments were related to the inheritance of 7 different characteristics of pea plants.
Another concept that will maybe appear in your exam is cross-pollination.
Yeah, what Mendel did was that he cut the stamens of the flowers so they don't fertilize themselves. Then, with a small paintbrush, he put pollen from another plant directly on the ovules of the first plant in order to control the variables of the crosses.
In 1865, he presented his work to the Natural History Society of BRNO. 30 years had to pass before these experiments were recognized and what were now called Mendel's law were established.
Well, I started doing my experiments around 1856. Everything began with peas. Why? Not only because they were cheap, but also because of a genetic variability. It was really easy to make crossing between them, as each flower has a male and female part. When I wanted to cross a plant from a variety of pea with a different one. First, I crossed one through breeding parents to another. The plants used in this initial cross are called pea generation or parental generation. 3. Then, I crossed the 2 species, giant and dwarf. I obtained a generation, the first generation, of equal individuals. This way, my first discovery. Although I expected to obtain intermediate-sized plants, all the pea plants were giant, called the giant character dominant, and the dwarf called it recessive. I started to grow these F1 hybrids and made them reproduce by self-fertilization, that is, using each pollen in each plant to pollinate the flower. I was shocked, recessive character reappeared. In 1865, I presented the results of my experiment with nearly 30,000 pea plants to the local Natural History Society. I didn't just record what my plants looked like in each generation. Instead, I counted exactly how many plants with each trait were present. If we are talking about heredity, and since each individual has 2 alleles, I can assume that the parents can give only 1 allele each. One of the female and one of the male, of course.
Oh yeah, they may or may not contain this information, but that is where fun begins.
That's right. If the 2 alleles are identical, the individual is called
Homozygous. And if the alleles are different, they are called
Heterozygous. So we know that if the allele is present, doesn't mean that the trait will be expressed.
That's right.
Dale. This will be the law of segregation. each allele is segregated to form 4 new allele combinations that express individual phenotypes of each member of the F2 generation. In heterozygous individuals, the allele expressed is the dominant. The recessive allele is present, but it isn't shown. The genotype an individual is made up of the many alleles it possesses, and the physical appearance of phenotype is determined by its alleles as well as by its environment. In my independent segregation law, the traits inherited through one gene will be inherited independently of the traits inherited through another gene. An individual inherits 2 different alleles from each of its 2 parents, and the phenotype of only one allele is visible in the offspring, then that allele is said to be dominant. For example, if one parent has 2 copies of allele with a capital A, that represents the dominant allele, and the second parent has 2 copies of the allele with lowercase a, the recessive allele, then the offspring will inherit a capital A lowercase a genotype and will show only the dominant phenotype.
Gregor Mendel definitively was one of the first influential researchers of the area of the modern genetics. Thanks to him, we were able to analyze and predict the probability to suffer a disease or even mind's capacities and natural talents. Because of that, we can ensure that without his contribution, the genetic advancements that we have today would have never been achieved. Having a lot of trouble to get this experiment done, Mendel gave the 100% of his effort in order to understand the reason of the different features of living beings. All of these observations, as simple as they were, gave us a completely different world and helped us to understand why are we the way we are and what makes us different from other people. Nowadays, Mendel's discoveries have helped many researchers to develop more complex theories about the genetic variability. Thanks to that, the human race has been able to survive and become more prepared to future disease and discoveries that surely will change our lifestyle and the planet.